Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something you've probably walked past a million times without giving it a second thought. We're going to look at the modern, urban longkang fishing experience. It's this wild intersection of biology, commercial recreation, and some deep-seated nostalgia. Honestly, it's a brilliant example of how we take these messy, real-world pastimes, totally sanitize them, and just drop them right into the middle of our modern shopping centers.
And to really get our heads around this phenomenon, we're pulling a highly specific and frankly pretty brilliant cultural insight from an internet blog by a blogger named Ang. We're specifically looking at an entry published on May 13th, 2026. This is actually part 255 of their ongoing series called Notes-on-Fishkeeping. You know, it's kind of incredible how just a single, super observant entry from a fish-keeping hobbyist can basically act like a magnifying glass, revealing all the hidden mechanics of our everyday environments.
All right, Section 1. The modern mall catch. Supervised shallow ponds in family entertainment centers.
Okay, let's dive into this. To really understand the whole picture, we need to peel back the very first layer of the onion and look at the physical space where all of this goes down today, the family entertainment center. So if you're just on a typical grocery run or wandering around the mall, the setup is super straightforward. It's basically a shallow, brightly lit, man-made pond where kids are handed these tiny little nets to try and catch fish. It's a totally contained, clean environment. Parents can stand right there on the edge, the water is shallow enough to be completely safe, and it just gives kids a fun, tactile challenge. But here's the thing. It's absolutely not just some random game that someone invented for the mall.
Moving on to Section 2, Roots of Longkang Fishing, Recreating the Rural Drains. Now, what's really interesting about this whole setup is that it's actually a highly engineered echo of the past. It's a deliberate recreation of something far, far less polished. Let's compare them. On one side, we've got the old-school longkang. Now, for those who might not know, longkang is just a local term for a drain. Historically, kids living in rural or developing urban areas would literally go out to these concrete storm drains and natural runoffs just to catch wild fish. It was muddy, there was absolutely zero supervision, and it was a genuine backyard adventure. Contrast that with our modern kiosk. As Eng points out in their notes, the modern mall setup is essentially a direct simulation of that classic longkang experience, but imported into a way cleaner, highly supervised setting. Basically, we've traded the unpredictable rural drain for a sterile mall kiosk. Which brings us to Section 3, the biological secret, the illusion of choice. Okay, so here is where our explainer takes a major turn from cultural nostalgia straight into pure biology. Because making this sanitized recreation actually work, it requires a very specific biological secret, and it relies completely on the illusion of choice. Look, if you read up on these indoor ponds, or even if you just casually glance at their marketing photos, you'd completely expect to find this vibrant aquatic ecosystem, right? The typical expectations include highly colorful, classic aquarium species. We're talking guppies, swordtails, mollies, goldfish, maybe even some baby koi. You know, those beautiful, fragile fish that instantly come to mind when we think of ornamental ponds. But as our seasoned fish-keeping blogger Ang so sharply observes, the reality is a total plot twist. Ang writes, I highly doubt anyone would put in species other than red tilapia. So despite all those colorful photos and the expectation of this vibrant, diverse mix of species, the reality of the pond's actual population is incredibly uniform.
And this brilliantly illustrates the hidden mechanics of commercial recreation. Enter the red tilapia. It's a specific type of cichlid, and honestly, it is the undisputed, unsung star of these catch-and-release setups. You see, the kiosk operators aren't out there choosing fish based on how pretty they look in a glossy brochure. No, they're choosing them based on a very specific set of biological survival traits.
So the absolutely crucial question here is why the red tilapia? Well, Ang breaks down the logic perfectly, and it is essentially a three-step masterclass in biological suitability for mall kiosks. Step 1, dull colors. Unlike a bright, flashy orange goldfish, the red tilapia often has a rather dull coloration in these settings, which makes it actively difficult for kids to spot them against the bottom of the pond. Step 2, high speed. I mean, these fish are incredibly fast. Ang notes that even an adult has a really hard time snagging one with those tiny little nets. It keeps the game challenging. And step 3, which is arguably the most important of all, extreme hardiness. Cichlids are notoriously tough. Think about it. In a shallow pool with dozens of kids constantly plunging nets into the water all day long, you need a fish that can survive intense stress. The red tilapia is a survivor. The whole game is literally designed to be hard for the player and safe for the fish.
And finally, Section 4,
a nostalgic recreation, the cycle of indoor fishing.
So let's zoom out and see how this all builds into a much larger cultural pattern. Because frankly, this isn't the first time we've seen this happen. This whole setup brilliantly captures the cycle of indoor fishing. Decades past, the authentic experience was out in the wild, catching whatever the heck was swimming in the local longkang drain. Then, as Ang reminds us, there was this massive craze years ago for indoor prawning and fishing ponds. Now, those were distinct because they almost always included a cookout element, right? You caught your prawn and you barbecued it right there on the spot. It was a clear step towards commercialization, but it still retained this gritty, consumptive element. And now, arriving at the present day, we have the ultimate sanitized version, the highly supervised catch-and-release mall kiosk. The fish aren't eaten anymore. They are purely interactive game pieces. Just these resilient little red tilapias playing their part in a pristine, perfectly contained loop.
Which brings us to a rather fascinating takeaway for us to chew on. We possess this absolutely incredible drive to take the messy, organic adventures of our past, like digging around in a muddy storm drain, and completely repackage them into perfectly engineered, biologically tested retail experiences. So as we continue to sanitize our rural pastimes for the convenience of modern malls, I want to leave you with this thought. What forgotten backyard adventure do you think we're going to creatively and cleanly recreate next? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep your eyes open next time you're at the mall, and I'll catch you next time.